Well, Saints fans, it is not the Monday that everybody had hoped for. The Saints have now played 3 games here at Caesars Superdome. I'm in the press box again, and 2 of those games have been losses. One to the Giants and yesterday to the Falcons. And both of those games kind of similar, if you think about it, especially early on. In that Giant game, Giants came in 0-3, and the Saints had 4 straight drives to start the game into Giant territory. And out of those 4 drives, they got 7 points. They had 6 of their first 7 drives yesterday against Atlanta into Falcon territory. All they got were 2 field goals out of 6 of 7. And on that 7th drive was when Trevor Siemian fumbled. Atlanta took it back and took the big lead. Team that came out running the ball great in the first quarter ended up having to throw every down in the fourth quarter, made it interesting, made a great comeback, took the lead. 2 not well executed 2-point conversion plays, I would say, would be the difference. And then Atlanta gets it with a minute one to play or a minute to play and a couple of timeouts. The same situation that the Saints basically had with Tom Brady. He might have had more, again, a minute 41. One ended up great for the Saints, and the Atlanta game did not, as they drive down the field for a game-winning field goal. The Saints dropped to 5-3. But those, to me, Jeff, as we talk to Jeff Nowak, the kind of similarity of the Giants and the Falcons, because Deuce and I had talked earlier. And I don't think you can say that the Atlanta team is an inferior team because it's the Falcons. It just is what it is. But if you let a team kind of hang around, and they didn't just let the Falcons hang around, they had the lead 10-3, 17-3 late in the third quarter, but just felt like the Saints could have kind of dominated this game early on and just couldn't get anything on the scoreboard and ended up costing them in the end.
Yeah, and I think, Malcolm Jenkins mentioned this after the game, and it's like when you're dealing with the things the Saints are dealing with, you're operating on these razor-thin margins. And, both home losses that you've seen from the Saints this year, you have seen other games that went very similarly and ended up in the Saints' favor. You had Washington in week 5, which was, almost a shot-for-shot remake of the loss of the Giants, except things went a little differently, and the margin was on the Saints' side. Last week against the Bucs, very similar to the loss yesterday, where things kind of went a certain way, but they broke the Saints' way when they needed them to. And this week they didn't. And, that's when you're operating on these razor-thin margins, it can go either way. And we've seen kind of the highs and lows twice now in this season. And it's just the striking thing is that the lows have all come at home other than, week 2 against the Panthers. I mean, this home field advantage does not feel like a significant advantage for the Saints right now. In their 3 home games, they're -1 point differential. They're 1-2 in their 6 road games plus a neutral site, if you want to call it that. They're +45. This is a road team now, apparently.
And I also think, at least for yesterday, the Falcons play better on the road because they react better to booing than they do to nothing because they have no one at their games. I looked at the Carolina game. I'm like, there was nobody there. So they'd rather have boos than apathy. So they've played better on the road. In fact, all of their wins have come away from home. I think when you look at the Saints team and they don't put pressure on a quarterback, they don't get turnovers. When they don't get turnovers, they lost the turnover battle yesterday. Could not get to the Giants quarterback. When they don't get any kind of significant pressure, it costs this defense. And this defense plays well, but not enough to where you can let a quarterback like Matt Ryan stand back there and pick and choose until the fourth quarter when the defense rose up and really made some big stops. But this is a team, talking about the Falcons, that literally cannot run the ball, cannot run it at all. So what they're going to do. And the Saints put some pressure on in the fourth quarter, got to Ryan a couple of times, and it was the difference.
Yeah, their best running back isn't a running back,
right?
Cordero Patterson, and
he showed that showed that at the end of the game,
right? But what that does do is it creates a lot of mismatches at other positions because not having that kind of traditional setup, I think, makes things a little difficult. And you saw that toward the end of the game. You saw Marshawn Lattimore matching up with Kyle Pitts. You saw Paulson Adebo on an island. It was zone coverage. He did not play it well on that final 64-yard catch and run to Cordero Patterson. And I think that's a type of situation that you give the Saints a couple weeks and you give them another matchup, I think they will handle it a lot better. They did not on the defensive side of the ball this week. And I will say Matt Ryan played an excellent game of football. He played like a veteran player. He was not rattled. That little pump fake he had and that jaunt into the end zone is really that clip kind of sums up the day for Matt Ryan. He looked like he was a step ahead at every point. And that said, the Saints still should have won that game. You put the defense in a situation that you expect them to stand up in, and they didn't. I think this is a 5-3 football team. The Saints are a 5-3 football team, and they're 5-3. The way they got there was not how I expected them to get there, but I think this is a 5-3 football team, and that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that, and I also agree with not how you thought they would have gotten here. The problem now becomes, at least in my estimation, is the next four. So you get Nashville, the Titans, who beat the Rams last night on the road. Then you get Philly, who's not playing well, but you still got to win in Philly, and it's never easy to do. Then you get Buffalo. Then you get Dallas. So these next four games, to me, and then you're back to your NFC South after that. But these next four games, 2 at home, 2 on the road, but both against three quality teams, and a team that's tough to beat at home. I mean, the whole season can be not summed up, but you can't lose these four. You can't go 1-3. You're gonna have to win a couple of these, if not 3 of these games.
Yeah, and I think that the next 4 games kind of illustrates the dynamic of why it is difficult to lose to NFC opponents and especially divisional opponents, knowing that these tiebreakers are going to be a factor down the stretch. All 3 of their losses are to NFC teams. Right. So these next few games, a win over the Titans would be nice, but it's not helping you in the playoff race as much as a win over the Falcons would have in the divisional race and in the NFC, playoff kind of jostling toward the end of the season. 3 losses in the NFC is going to put them on the wrong side of a lot of tiebreakers unless they are able to kind of run the table down the stretch. It's the same situation the Saints have found themselves in the last few years, going 13-3 and not getting a bye. I don't think this is a loss that's going to keep them out of the playoffs, but much like in 2019 when they lost to the Falcons, it's when you're probably going to look at down the road and say, man, that's a brutal loss when you kind of see how things shake out.
That's why the Dallas game will be important. They've won over Washington, lost to the Giants. I mean, you got to start thinking tiebreakers. They get the tiebreaker with Green Bay. Green Bay's probably going to win their division, and so it shouldn't. I think the records are going to be different. But you're right; these NFC games, the Saints basically until yesterday controlled their destiny. They controlled it. Now they really don't. But you still got one with Carolina, one with the Falcons, and one with Tampa. But you're right; it comes to the end of that season, and 2 of those games are the final 2: Carolina and Atlanta. And you talked earlier about summing up the game. To me, yesterday, there are a lot of drives that summed it up. But for me, it was in the second quarter. I think the Saints are down 3-0, and they've got the ball 1st and 10 at the Atlanta 28. They're at the Atlanta 28, 1st and 10. Then there's a holding penalty. So it's 1st and 20 at the 38. Then a false start. Now we're at the 43 after an incomplete pass and a delay of game. Now you're at Atlanta's 48. You've run basically a play, and it was a deep incomplete pass. And so you end up having to punt. You had the ball 1st and 10 at Atlanta's 28 and end up punting the football. That's just, I mean, it's not, the penalties were brutal to begin with, 10 penalties. 6 of them were holding.
And if I'm remembering that drive correctly, it started in Falcons territory after a 4th down.
Not that
stop.
one.
It's not. Okay, so there was another drive.
Right. There's another drive that started at the 44, Atlanta's 44. This started in Saints territory, and they got to the 28. I'm pretty sure I got the game book. I could be wrong on that. But
I think you're right. I think
one of those drives started at the 44, and one drive got to the 28. There's lots of it's like the Giant game. They lost one of those series on giving up on downs. Did the same thing with the Giants. Gave up on downs yesterday. But that drive and those penalties and the timing of those penalties, man, that's rough. And then we'll end up talking about the drops. And really, this is not. you want to say it's wildly inconsistent with how things have gone, but really through the season, Troutman has been targeted 26 times, 15 receptions. That's 57%, not good. Kenny Stills, 17 targets, 5 receptions, 29.4%. Callaway has the most. He's got 39 targets, 56%, only 22 receptions. Traquan Smith is 70%, but he's got such a small, he's only 3 games. Deontay Harris is the strongest. He's got 31 targets, 21 receptions, so almost 70% there. My question would be, and I'm going to talk to Coach Payton tonight, and we'll end up talking about the Saints coaches show tonight. I don't understand, what am I missing on Juwan Johnson, right? He comes in, he's a converted wide receiver to tight end. His first 4 games, he had 10 targets, 6 receptions. That's 60%. And on this team, that's pretty good. And 3 of the 6 were touchdowns. In the last 4 games, he was inactive yesterday. In the last 4 games, he's had 3 targets, 1 each game, and 1 reception. And then he's inactive yesterday. I just don't, we're not at practice, and I just don't know what I'm missing with Juwan. I think he's hard to cover, and it's not like Troutman and these guys are doing such a great job catching the ball. Gary Griffin did last week, but wasn't targeted. I don't understand what's going on with Nick Vannett. Technically, he was cleared to play on October 21st, and then the Saints supposedly have like 21 days to activate him. Which that's but no, it's come and gone. If in fact it was October 21st, that's when they kind of cleared him to return, so to speak. So I don't know. I don't understand Juwan Johnson. I feel like that guy could do something, and certainly at this point with Troutman, I give him a shot.
It did seem like they were working Troutman more into the passing attack yesterday. I mean, it was his biggest workload of the season, and he came up big down the stretch. I will give him that. He had a rough first half, but so did everybody. So you can't give him a pass on that, but you can't give anyone a pass. And he made some big catches down the stretch. He took a big hit down at the 5-yard line on that scoring drive there. So maybe that kind of loosens the skids up a bit for him. There was one thing that went very positively for the Saints yesterday, and it got lost in all of the hullabaloo around at the end. Brian Johnson hit a 50-plus yard field goal. First time all season, the Saints have connected on a field goal outside of 50 yards. I don't even know if they'd connected on one outside of 40 yards. I think maybe Rosas might have hit a 40-plus yarder in the opener against the Packers, but I can't recall.
We have to remember, Brian Johnson was 6 for 6, and his longest field goal was 35.
Exactly.
That was it. He kicked nothing but basically extra points. And in fact, he missed one of his extra points, and that's 33. Right. So you're right. That was a big kick. It was a good kick for Johnson. So hopefully give him some confidence, and at least it shows that coach has faith in him and his leg to do it. So because he's the guy.
Well, I would argue they didn't have faith in him to do it until you see him do it, right? Like they might have said, we'll probably send him out there, but we hadn't seen him do it. So there was still a question in my mind of whether he is the kicker that you trust to win a game or to kick a long field goal that you need. So to me, seeing that, I think there are a lot of things you can take away from this game, a lot of things you can just throw out in the trash. But I think that going down the road is a big development for a team that just hasn't been able to kick. They haven't. How many times have you seen them have to teeter on kicking versus going for it on 4th down and going for it and not getting it? So if he's a guy that you can at least trust in those intermediate to long kick situations, that changes the game, especially, like I said, you're talking about a team that's playing on these razor-thin margins, those 3 points throughout the game. And the 3 points that they made on that 50-yard field goal is what allowed them to kind of get back into a lead, a 1-point lead. If he misses on that and they miss on those 2-point conversions and all of a sudden you score that touchdown, you're still behind, So, I mean, the kicking game is easy to overlook in a wild game like this one, but I think it was important.
We'll close out talking about the running game because it leads me into a perfect promo for tonight's coaches show. So Atlanta comes in, they can't stop the run. Carolina had run for 200 plus against them. The Saints rushed for 69 yards in the first quarter. Ingram and Kamara just kind of doing whatever they want to do. And it's like, they're eating up the clock and doing everything right. I mean, they're on pace for 278, something like that, right? 276 for the game. And then in the second quarter, they rushed for 14 yards. And in the third quarter, when it was still a game, it was 10-3. It didn't become 17-3 until somewhat later in the third quarter. They rushed for 16 yards. So 69, 14, 16 against a team that cannot stop the run. They proved that in the first quarter. I'm not sure I'll get an answer to that question tonight from either head coach Sean Payton. Also on the show tonight is going to be running back coach Joel Thomas. So we'll have a lot to talk to him about, but Mark Ingram back part of this offense and Alvin Kamara and all that he does. And really, I'm assuming that parts of the practices are going to have Taysom Hill, as in a running back situation where he will work some of the running backs. Same thing with Deontay Harris. If you're doing some jet sweeps and trying to get him into the open. So lots of things to talk about tonight. Saints coaches show tonight, 6:30 to 7:30. Head coach Sean Payton will join us. And then again, running backs coach Joel Thomas. He missed, of course, a couple of games because of the COVID-19 situation earlier with the coaches. So that's tonight, 6:30 to 7:30 on all the stations along the New Orleans Saints radio network.